Well, it gave me a huge amount of empathy for them and compassion because I saw how wounded their inner children were. And as an adult, they had developed these unhealthy coping skills.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. This is Roy Woon, Executive Director. I want to tell you, do not listen to this unless you're mature. This is as explicit adult content in it. We are talking today about sexual addiction and sexual abuse in ways that the church usually does not talk about it. And do not have your audio on if there's young ears around. This is for mature audiences only. Now, into the studio with Andy Spell.
Hey, Crucible Project Podcast. This is my part 2 conversation with Doug Carpenter here, and we're talking about some things that have just struck a chord with me. We are talking about the shame that comes along with sexual abuse or sexual acting out as a child. Doug, tell everybody what the name of your book is.
It's called Secret Shame, A Survivor's Guide to Understanding Male Sexual Abuse and Male Sexual Development.
Thank you. So one of the things that I know of is that sometimes there can be a lot of confusion, a lot of pain, a lot of hurt around sexual abuse. You may have dealt with this some, and if we can go down this road a little bit, what do you do for men who find that they were in situations with other boys, with maybe family members, with cousins, where there was curiosity and some acting out happened? Maybe it wasn't abuse, close in age. What have you done with men who carry some shame around, you know what, I was just really curious and we did some things and man, I just carry some shame that, my buddies and I, we sat around and touched each other, we masturbated together or whatever.
Right.
What do they do with that?
The research shows that about 25% of pubescent boys or early development or teenage boys, but before they really actually start dating and connecting with girls, 25% of boys will have some kind of same-sex sexual encounter with another boy. And that's simply out of curiosity. It's not because I have an interest in this other person. It's that I have an interest in my own sexuality and what this feels like. And I want to experience this for myself. So it's a sense of curiosity. And if if these boys are doing something with other boys their age, they're all probably doing that or they're out of a sense of curiosity. Mm-hmm. And many men don't feel like that was abuse. They walk away and feel like, that was me exploring and I shouldn't have done that. Okay, well, I first of all don't want to should on anything.
Right. Right, yes.
I just want you to accept that you are a normal developing young man who had a normal, healthy degree of curiosity about sexuality, and your body was responding just exactly how God designed it to, and your body's pumped full of testosterone at that age. Now, here's a difference. And this is kind of what happened in my own sexual abuse story. I had some kids in my friend group who were much more knowledgeable about sex because they had been exposed to a lot of pornography. Mm-hmm. And so they were bringing things to the group for the purpose of manipulating people to participate.
Okay.
That creates a power differential.
Right.
That is something that I considered more like abuse. So for years, I looked back and I thought, I wasn't sexually abused. But yet I had all these symptoms in my adult life that if I sat down and talked to another therapist would have said, this sounds like maybe you've been abused in the past. So it wasn't until I really came to terms with this, the main guy who did this was, maybe 1 year older than I was, but he had so much more knowledge. Like he was manipulating and drawing me into this, and knew that if he touched me in certain ways, certain things would happen. And I did not know that. And so I had to come to terms with was sexually manipulated and sexually abused because this person had more knowledge and more authority of the subject and was trying to expose me. This wasn't two kids who were just like, I wonder what this feels like.
Right.
And there's a big difference between someone coming in with motive and manipulation or just curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as we look at this and I think about, just there's so much stuff. And then, man, if you were brought up like I was in a pretty strict
Yes.
Christian home where like even, TV shows, we couldn't watch certain TV shows because the women dressed a certain way or.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then there was this is so taboo. There really is no one to talk to about this. So just shut it down.
Yeah. So I grew up very similar. Like on Saturday mornings, I would sneak and try to watch American Bandstand with Dick Clark. Is that his name?
Yes.
And on Saturday too, Solid Gold would be on. I don't even know if people remember Solid Gold, but
I do.
I would get so much trouble because those people were dancing so lewdly. And you're just being basically a little pervert because you want to watch these people dance this way. So I grew up in a very strict environment. So when my abuse started happening to me, I felt like I would have been blamed in some way in this religious environment. So there was no way I could share what was happening with anyone. It was something I had to conceal, bury, repress, hide. And I just had tons and tons of guilt about what was happening because I didn't understand everything that was going on, but I also knew I had no one I could tell.
Yeah. So let's go back so you talked about the first thing and how did you state it in the last session about the first thing that you want men to know that our bodies do what? How did you frame that? Our bodies?
Body betrayal, that we have body betrayal, that our bodies respond exactly the way God designed them to. If you stimulate the male body, it's going to respond. Even if you stimulate sexually the male mind, the body's going to respond.
Right.
Doug,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I struggled with was there were times I'd have dreams about the abuse. And I was like, man, dude, like, am I wanting to go back and relive that? I don't think but it was so tied to that first experience was so, it was such
strong,
such an impactful moment in my life.
Well, we call it imprinting. It was a strong imprint.
Okay.
In your sexual template.
So what do we do for men who have an imprint that they don't know what to do with because it's just there and it's so strong? So our body's given us away and now we've got this imprint. What do we do with the imprint?
Yeah. So this is definitely more of definitely an adult concept. And it's actually a very small portion of my book, but it's the part of my book that is kind of blown up. And I did a sexual abuse conference and I did spend about 15 minutes talking about what I'm getting ready to talk about. And that segment, the person I was doing that seminar with pulled out that 15 minutes and turned it into a podcast called Sexual Arousal versus Desire. And the podcast blew up. And it's like the second most listened to podcast that we have in the organization called Husband Material that I am involved with.
Okay. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about sexual desire versus sexual arousal. So I believe, and this is kind of similar to the concept of we as Christians are flesh and spirit. So I believe, and I use the term sexual desire to represent the side of us that God designed. He set out us on a path in life to learn about godly things, to learn about sexual things, to learn about life. He put desires within us. When you ask a 10-year-old boy, what does he want to be when he grows up? He's going to say, I want to be a fireman. I want to get married. I want to have kids. Like, he has a normal trajectory for his life. And I think that's our God-given sexual desire, all those natural things in life. But what happens is life interferes and it takes a piece of that desire and it splits it off, and we start developing sexual arousal. We're introduced to things that God didn't design for us to be introduced to, such as pornography. Someone teaches us about masturbation or shows us or abuses us with masturbation. And we get these sexual imprints on our sexual template, oftentimes of things we didn't ask for, we didn't know were going to happen, and now we don't want. So here I am, a young teenage boy. My only sexual exposure is to this other man.
Right.
And so I become very aroused and very stimulated by other males. Well, my healthy self over here, my sexual desire has no desire to be involved in that. I want to grow up. I want to be married. I want to have a family. I want to live godly, all these things. But now I have this part of me that becomes aroused by all these things I don't want. Or maybe my perpetrator introduced things to me that now I've been left with some kind of sexual fetish that I never wanted, never asked for.
Right.
I don't feel like it's normal, but yet my body and my mind and my genitalia have learned to strongly respond to this. So I try to help men identify, you have these two parts of you now. You have your sexual desire and you have your sexual arousal. And the further apart these things come through development, the thing that fills that space is shame. Shame pours into that space and continues to keep these two things separated, and it pushes them further and further and further apart because our sexual arousal goes into secrecy more and more and more. And we're turned on by things that we don't want to be turned on by. And that when we're in our real selves, we're not turned on by it. We want to leave alone. But something triggers us over here and we find ourselves engaging.
And when I'm not having help and I'm not seeing a therapist or I'm not doing my work, it seems like the harder I try to put that arousal away, and the more that I'm trying to do something, the more it seems to show up. And it's just so stinking frustrating.
Yeah. And that's where you really have to work on this arousal part by, number one, we have a concept in husband material called floss. You have to understand your fear. You have to understand the lies that came about with that. You have to understand the origin of this for you. Get in touch with the sadness and then be able to surrender that. You have to get in touch with this child who was innocent, who was exposed to corrupt things.
Yeah.
You have to gain insight about, okay, why do I have a foot fetish? Why do I have a lingerie fetish? Why do I have whatever you're into that you don't want? Because somebody trained your mind that way. You became conditioned through stimulus and response to respond to this. And now it's something you don't want, and it's causing problems in your adult life. So you have to recognize these two parts. You have to grow this healthy self. You have to recognize, understand, and have compassion for this part of you that is your sexual arousal that's pulling you away from your sexual desire. And then once you name that, you can tame it.
Right.
If you can name it, you can tame it.
Yes.
And then you, in your core self, have to decide, which one of these lives do I want to live in? Do I want to walk in my God-designed sexual desire that he has for me? Or do I want to continue to play in my trauma and live my life in sexual arousal that is going to keep me full of shame?
And Doug, what helped me was the person I finally talked to about this looked at me, because there was a dude that I love, a guy that I respect. When I finally talked to him about it, he was like, yeah, me too. And I was like, what?
Right.
I was like, are you saying? He totally took, I felt like in that moment, because I was miserable, I was sad, I was broken. And he immediately, it just like the shame. And it took a while, but the shame started to leave, because he was like, dude, me too. Yes, I've had those arousals. I've had those feelings.
Yes.
man, dude, there's nothing wrong with you. Man, that's typical. And
Right.
normalizing it and naming it brought so
Yes.
much. And then it made it possible for me to actually do the work I needed to do to get help and to get saved and to move
Exactly.
forward.
Exactly. Yeah. If you can walk into the sexual arousal and turn the light on in that dark room and start exploring what's in there, I think the insights that you will gain from that will be powerful and will help catapult you toward health.
Yeah, I agree.
But you can't be afraid of that part of you. You got to go there.
And so and that's, I think, part of the shame is in this world, there's so many, on our weekends, so many men speak to sexual shame, hurt, pain. And I think even in our world, it is still seen that if you struggle with some stuff, you're a pervert, or at least we think that's how we're going to be judged. And we have got to get to the point where these things are taken out of the dark because the darkness keeps men hidden, and it causes men to act out and go to prison. The minute, Doug, I was on a weekend and there was a guy coming in and he had just gotten out of prison. He was in his 60s and he had sexual abuse. And even with all the joy and love and grace I had, there was a little bit of me that was judging the man before he got there. And I'm telling you, he started telling his story about what had happened to him as a child and as a teenager. And I remember having these words, and I didn't want to give him a pass or say that what he did was okay. But I immediately in my mind thought, no wonder he did the things
what he did.
And I had so much compassion for him.
So much compassion.
Yeah.
We are all just human beings. We are very fallible. Our flesh is weak. Life can be really tough on us. And we need to have a lot of compassion for ourselves and for others.
Because I thought to myself, man, if I'd have been brought up like that, I probably maybe would have done the same thing.
Right. Well, that's why the other psychologists would say, I don't know how you can work with those guys. And I would just be like, that man is such a good man, but he's just so wounded.
Yeah. Yes. What are some other steps that you like to take a man through when he's trying to break that shame?
Well, again, confronting all the lies, really getting to the point of seeing my sexual arousal for what it is, how it developed. Another important step is we have to make meaning of the abuse. Even if the meaning is that person was a perpetrator and I was there, I was available, and he would have done that to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't truly about me. It was about him. It was a very selfish act. So really getting to make some meaning out of what happened to you. And then you have to learn to choose that you're going to live a good life, that you're not going to, I use this concept of we go from victims to becoming survivors to becoming thrivers. And it's kind of an old concept in the sexual abuse world, but we got to get you out of that being a victim. And you have to see this little kid as, hey, he survived this. And now how am I going to let him grow up to become a thriver? And as you become a thriver, you move over into living within your healthy desire.
Right. Man, that is so good.
And it's a long and it's a slow process sometimes.
And doesn't it feel like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, or whatever that concept is? Like you think, man, I've got this. And then all of a sudden you're in something. And you're like, why am I back there again?
Well, you've believed these lies you've told about yourself or that you've been told for 25 years, 30 years, know, and you're just now starting to deal with this. You've got years of garbage on top of the truth.
Yeah.
That has to be shoveled away. And sometimes you don't even know it's garbage until somebody else sits in front of you and goes, that is a lie. That's not the truth. That's not who you are. That's not what you wanted.
I don't know if you have this conversation. I've had this occasionally. What do you do for the man that says, I do want, and I've done work and I'm working on things, that he does want really good connection? And there's times that the trauma or fear or whatever comes up and he's trying to connect with his spouse and then something happens and he can't. And then there's the shame spiral there of, man, did I just, even though it was done to me and even though I can give myself grace, man, is my sexuality just ruined forever? Or, am I like, gosh, I sometimes things just get in the way. Man, what's
And
wrong with me?
that's where surrender, acceptance, understanding your triggers, all those things come into play. Like I have to really get to know myself and what things trigger me to get tripped up.
Right.
And when I understand that trigger, I can then figure out how to manage it.
Yeah.
Like there
Yeah.
may be certain things I have to avoid or stay away from or not engage in, because if I give it an inch, it's going to take a mile.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
I can't tell an alcoholic to go sit in a bar and just have a sip. That's not going to work.
Right. Right.
I can't tell a guy who's struggling with same-sex attraction, well, just go watch a little bit of porn.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. There are things in your life that you're going to have to surrender
Right.
to live in your healthy self.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a process. And I tell guys this all the time. So many men come in and be like, I just want to get rid of this behavior. I want it out of my life. The research shows if you start any kind of behavior before the age of 14 that has addictive properties to it, you are probably going to this is probably going to be a lifelong struggle for you. So you have to recognize these parts in your sexual arousal may not go away, but they don't have to rule you. You
That's
can
so good.
tame them. You can calm them down and make choices as a healthy adult. You didn't have a choice as a child, but you have a choice now.
Mm-hmm.
And how am I going to strengthen my good parts to be in control? So
Yeah.
these triggers don't trip me up.
I love that. Man, we can't cover everything. We can't do everything in one podcast or two podcasts. So, Doug, where can men and women, where can they find your book? Where can they find you? Where can they find husband material? Just, would you kind of give us an idea of where all of those things can be found?
So Husband Material has two components. We have husbandmaterial.com, which is a place where we call the Academy, where you can go through a series and a program to help you outgrow your unhealthy behaviors. And then we also have a Husband Material, which is just an open community for people to come and be a part of who are struggling, need support. You can find my books on Amazon. I have a couple of books. You can find them through Amazon, or you can go to my website, which is just douglascarpenter.com, and you can read material on my website. You can order the books. There's links there that will take you to Amazon where you can purchase the material. So yeah, you can go to my website. You can email me. I also am the owner. My wife and I, she's a therapist as well. We own Insight Counseling Services in Auburn Hills, Michigan. So insightcounselingpc.com is the business website. You can find me through there. So that's kind of the ways you can reach me.
Man, I love it. Doug, thank you so much for this conversation. Every time I hear any of this, it just reminds me that the work I've done, I'm so thankful for the Crucible Project. If you're listening to this, man, this Crucible Project can help you start a journey of freedom. It did for me. CrucibleProject.org or com. I can't remember. I should know that, right? But anyway, just look up the Crucible Project online. We have got weekends everywhere. It is a beginning. You will find men who see you, who bring you grace. You can be truthful. You can do work that you thought maybe was not possible at all. And sometimes it's around things like this that you find out you are not alone. And I know the women got to have a Me Too moment, but for me, in the late teens, when people were talking about this, I found a group of men that said Me Too as well. And that felt so good to know I was not alone. Doug, thank you for today.
You're very welcome.
We may have another conversation coming up soon.
Yeah.
Again, I know that we talked about things that are uncomfortable, but they're not bad and they're not wrong.
Right.
And I want to take those.
Fully agree.
I want to just lift those words away. We should not have shame. Here I am shooting, but I don't want men to carry shame around this anymore, because shame says I'm bad and I did something bad. And the truth is we have some guilt, maybe of some things, but shame needs to go so we can get the health we need to have. Man, thanks so much, Doug.
Thank you.
And thank you for being part of our podcast.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you're listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.